for this? Good. Welcome to Sacramento's historic city cemetery. The cemetery was built in 1849, or first opened in 1849, and so it's been here for a long time. It's now on the National Register of Historic Places because there are a number of important burials here and a number of interesting artifacts as well. My name is Judy Eitzen, and I am currently the president of the Old City Cemetery Committee, which is the nonprofit that works in support of the Sacramento Historic City Cemetery. We work with the city, and I want to thank you for purchasing tickets for tonight's event, because the profits from your tickets, the proceeds from your tickets, will go toward replacing, repairing, and restabilizing historic artifacts and headstones and monuments throughout the cemetery. So I thank you very much. I'm going to tell you a few things that you need to know before you go on tonight's tour. I don't want to give you scared or anything else, but I need to make sure you know what to do. Now, there are some folks here who have lights and light wands. They're waving them around, lanterns. These are your ushers, and they are here for your safety. So please do whatever it is they say. You're not one. Okay. That's fine. You're welcome to carry your candle anyway. It's perfectly all right. We don't care. If you have a light to help you see the ground, that's great. But please do not shine it in the face of anyone of our residents who are telling them stories. They really don't like that sort of thing. And if you have a cell phone, please put it on silent so that you don't disturb our residents. They don't understand modern technology, and they get a little upset about such things. Now, I ask that you stay on the paved roadway because it's a little less bumpy, and your footing will be more certain, and you'll be safer. If you step off of it, you're liable to walk into an area where one of our four-footed residents has dug a hole, and the ground is uneven. So I really want you to be safe, because this is a light that helps you to see where you're going, but you're going into the darkness. So we want to make sure that you're safe. And the ushers will have to keep you that way. We also have nocturnal visitors, or residents, I should say. They live here all the time, and we don't see them in the daytime, but they do come out at night, especially those little black and white pussycats with the fluffy tails and the stripe down their back. You know the ones I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they don't like lights, so if you should see one of them, shine your light in their direction, and they will run the other way. If they do not, then you run the other way. Just saying, trying to keep you safe. Now, you're going to have a wonderful tour. If Edgar Allan Poe had come to the West Coast, he might very well have written the stories, some of the stories that you're going to hear about tonight that have to do with our residents here. In fact, you're very fortunate, because your tour guide tonight is the Raven. Ooh. Not everybody gets to hear the stories of the Raven. And he's waiting for you over here. If you will follow around to where the bell is, I hope to see you evermore.
Nevermore. 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 Terribly sorry. When you're known for asked repeatedly to say one English word that you're known for, you kind of have a tendency to forget you've actually been trained to speak several hundred English words. What I was trying to say was good evening. Welcome to Old City Cemetery's Lantern Tours 2019. My name is, well, my name can't be quite pronounced properly by your human throats, but when I'm in human circles, I usually go by the name of Abram Brennan, which translated could mean Father of Sorrows, which makes sense because I am the son, in a manner of speaking, so to speak, of Edgar Allan Poe. Although I flowed out of his pen rather than the usual method. My mother, an uncommon example of the common raven Corvus corax by the name of Grimm, who was the pet of Charles Dickens. So a strong literary background between my father and my Uncle Chuck, I suppose. Now, my father, although born in Boston, is closely associated with the city of Baltimore, and I just flew in from Baltimore, and boy are my arms tired. Wait, that wasn't a joke. Why are you laughing at that? No, you creatures who can't fly, I suppose that does make sense. I can see how that's funny to you humans. My apologies. My sense of humor is not really a feather in my cap. Now, brought you here tonight. Let me ask you this question: is the cemetery desolate and terrible? Is it bleak?
Yes.
Is it black and lurid?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Then the stage is set. Tonight you will hear from some of our eternal residents telling you true tales of their lives, accounts that may have influenced my father in his writing, if he'd ever made it out here to Sacramento, with their intrigue, their mystery, their insanity, their murder, and their death. If you've ever wondered what kind of tales my father may have written about had he ever visited Sacramento, come walk with me and wonder nevermore. Now, I'm glad, before we get going, I do want to point out, I'm glad you came so quickly when I rang the bell. That is a skill that may come in handy later tonight. You see, in the 18th and 19th centuries, when my father was writing, the early 19th century, premature burial, the fear of premature burial was very strong. In fact, my father based the premature burial, the short story, The Premature Burial, on that very fear. It's such a widespread, deep fear that a number of designs for what were known as safety coffins were designed and built. One such design would feature a bell on a stand with above ground, reaching down via a rope underground to inside a coffin of the assumed to be deceased, probably deceased, just in case they weren't. Upon resuscitation, they could pull on that rope and get help before they suffocated. So, like I said, that skill may come in later tonight. I do want to, the poem you'll hear more of later tonight. I do want to quote just a little bit of it. Talking about bells has reminded me of this poem. In this case, these are funeral bells. These are bells, iron bells that are meant to call people to a funeral rather than the bells I just talked about that were wrong after. If somebody would bury you, would happen to wake up. Keeping time, as death knells, in a happy runic rhyme, to the rolling of the bells. Of the bells, to the tolling of the bells. Of the bells, to the moaning and the groaning of the bells. Now, let's see what tonight has to offer. Follow me, please.
Come closer, come. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Adelaide H. Duvall. I am the niece of the famous and now deceased Mr. William Emmett Coleman. My uncle was a lecturer, writer, and spiritual medium. And he taught me everything I know about spiritualism and how to communicate with the dead. What's that? You're not all familiar with spiritualism? Well, it's a belief that those who have gone before us have both the ability and the inclination to communicate with the living. The afterlife or spirit world is not a static place, but one where spirits continue to evolve and grow. The spiritualists often have spirit guides who provide them with information and advice. My uncle, William Coleman, had such guides, and they would be rapping on his desk as he worked, providing him with advice and guidance. Since he passed this May of 1909, I can feel his presence beside me, and I believe that he will be here tonight to give us his information and advice.
Now, my uncle was a prolific writer on occult subjects, but he was also a skeptic, and he was very careful of imposters. You must remember his expose on Madame Blavatsky, that Russian occultist that Uncle showed had plagiarized nearly every word of her work for her own nefarious purposes. Like my uncle before me, I too have, at times, become disillusioned with spiritualism. It is a field that can be dominated by fakers and frauds. But I have felt the presence of the spirits and received their guidance just like my uncle had. Mr. William Emmett Coleman was a true spiritualist, as am I. He was such a brilliant man. You should have seen his home in San Francisco. He lived in only one room, and every other room was taken over by books and books and more books. Over 25,000 volumes. He had the largest collection by any one person in all of Western America. Now, my uncle truly believed in the wonders of the afterlife, but he had a very real fear of being buried alive. This was a reasonable fear. I've heard of such an incident happening here in this very cemetery. My uncle was so afraid that he would be put into the ground and crushed and suffocated by the dirt around him, that he directed in his will that his wrists be sliced and his arteries bled out to ensure that he would not suffer the calamity of being put into the ground while still breathing. Oh, I truly hope we'll be able to reach Uncle tonight. It would be such a tragedy if I could speak with him. Nevermore. Excuse me, I must continue my preparations to commune with the dead.
As my father wrote in 1842 in Eleanor, those who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night.
And I'm happy to welcome you to the Tuesday Club's 8th bi-monthly tea of 1908. As you may know, the Tuesday Club began as a literary club, and today we will be discussing Mr. Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Murders at La Rue Morgue. It's purported to be the very first detective story with all of the intrigue that it offered. As a Poe fan, you may already know he's famous for saying, "There's nothing more poetical than the death of a beautiful woman." Which reminds me, while we're waiting for the meeting to start, have you by chance heard that story about the Kuwaharas?
Oh.
Poor Mrs. Kuwahara. She was murdered. At first, all the gossip was about the intrigue of it all. She was found murdered inside a locked room, and it's as if the murderer had been invisible. So Mr. Kuwahara owns that pool hall over on 3rd Street, and Mr. Nakamura is a friend and an employee of the Kuwaharas. He often shared a table with them. Now, Mr. Kuwahara, they're saying, was talking about selling his pool hall and moving out of the city. Mrs. Kuwahara was young and beautiful, and they say Nakamura was in love with her. In fact, in the days leading up to the tragedy, he had been seen following the couple about town, acting very, very strangely. And then, on the night of March 6th, shots rang out from the boarding house where the Kuwaharas lived, and others had to chop down the door. Inside, they found Mr. Kuwahara in a state of great distress at the scene before him. His wife, killed by a gunshot wound to the chest, to the temple, and Mr. Nakamura killed by a gunshot wound to the chest. It's such a tragedy. Well, like the Poe tale, this is a classic story of who did what and whom do you believe. Some say Mrs. Kuwahara was wrapped up in a very poetical triangle involving her husband, and Mr. Nakamura. Maybe be Mr. Kuwahara discovered an affair between the two of them, and that's why he thought to sell his place and move out of the city. I don't know. What do you think? So, as the story goes, on the night of the tragedy, while Mr. and Mrs. Kuwahara were out at a motion picture show, Mr. Nakamura snuck into their room and hid underneath the bed. Gives me the shivers just to think of it. When Mrs. Kuwahara and Mr. Kuwahara returned for the evening and retired to their room, they didn't have a clue that they weren't alone. And then, in the early light of morning, Mr. Nakamura crept out from underneath his hiding spot and shot Mrs. Kuwahara in cold blood right into the temple. And Mr. Kuwahara leaped out of bed. He covered himself with the bedclothes, and he witnessed Mr. Nakamura fire his gun a second time, this time into his own heart. Not everyone believes it happened like that. Some say Mr. Kuwahara found Mr. and Mrs. Kuwahara and Mr. Nakamura together and killed the both of them. But like the Poe tale, this is a good investigation rendered the truth. After evidence was presented to the court, Mr. Kuwahara was declared to have told the truth and cleared of all charges. Cleared, yes. But was he innocent? What do you think? It seems we shall know. Nevermore. Did you hear the bell? They're about to get started with the meeting. I do hope you enjoy the reading today.
There are some secrets which do not permit themselves to be told. The Man of the Crowd, 1840. And somehow I don't think those bells you were hearing were for the reading, for the meeting. Might have been one of those coffin bells.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you act now, you can make that grave deeper and you can occupy tonight for a special price. Do we have any takers? In fact, we can dig even deeper in two of you.
Yeah, just smile and nod, don't make any deals.
First two to speak up. Or maybe here.
Although it is true, we still have a few burials per year here in the cemetery. But as you might imagine, after all these years, since 1849, when it was first founded, there's not much more space. If you can prove that you belong to a family that owns a plot, or if you're part of an organization, say, Mason's family with a Masonic section, you might be able to spend eternity here at City Cemetery.
But please, you must tell no one that you've seen me. You see, I disappeared from Sacramento way back in 1898. No one here has seen or heard from me since, and I'd kind of like to keep it that way. Now, my first career here in town was in insurance. I found that to be a rather disagreeable line of work, so then I went into banking. Before long, I had risen to the top of my department, Chief Mortgage Officer at the Union Building and Trust. Oh, the 1890s, they were an exciting time here in Sacramento. The city was bursting at the seams. New houses and offices, they were going up everywhere. The city desperately needed to grow. But to do that, Sacramento needed a man with power, a man with vision, a man with money. And I actually had access to money. So I decided I was the man for the job. Now, just a couple miles down Broadway here, there was a big swath of land that was ripe for the taking. I purchased it, and there I developed Oak Park, Sacramento's very first neighborhood. Now maybe, just maybe, using my position at the bank, I helped along a few of the more questionable loan applications. But that was my job to help people, right? And of course, it didn't do me any harm either. But I want you to know that I was an honorable man. I never, ever committed an indiscretion. Well, maybe there was one indiscretion. One itty-bitty, teeny-weeny indiscretion. I met Miss Eugenia Flora Howell at the bank. She was just 21 years old, and her husband had dumped her, left her to survive by her own resources. Well, I was a married man myself, and I knew how difficult married life could be. As her banker, I can tell you, she didn't have many resources. But as her admirer, well, let's just say she had resources aplenty, if you know what I mean. Oh, Eugenia was a lovely lady, and we had some good times together, really good times. Until the day she told me she was great with child, and I was the father. Oh, well, as I said, I'm an honorable gentleman, and I pledged to stand by her and do the right thing. But you know what? She was no honorable lady. You know what she did? Went over there to San Francisco, took up with some shyster lawyer, and they set out to blackmail me. I got a letter saying unless I gave her $50,000, she was going to go public with the news of our affair and the baby. Well, clearly I could not afford to let that happen. Not only that, but my wife would kill me. Friends, it gets worse. At the bank, things were going south on me there too. You know those questionable loans I mentioned? Well, a lot of them were going into default. The bank was repossessing houses right and left. Now, the bank didn't want property. The bank wanted their money. And they were looking at me to get it. It is a sobering moment in a man's life when he realizes that he is worth more dead than alive. But the notion of faking one's own death, now that's a delicate proposition. I mean, one wrong move, and it can have irreversible consequences. I had to think of something easier. I had to hatch a better plan. And then I thought of it. I would simply disappear. On the morning of January the 11th, 1898, I marched down there to the bank. I had all of my accounts put in the name of my dear, sweet, loving, adorable wife. And then I flew the coop. Now, back in 1898, it was much easier to disappear than it would be today. I only had to go as far south as Fresno. And there I have lived out the remainder of my days working in, wait for it, banking and real estate. The people of Sacramento have seen or heard from me nevermore. Now, friends, it's time for me to return to the shadows of Sacramento history. But please remember, you didn't see me.
There is no exquisite beauty without some strangeness in the proportion. Lygia, 1838. I should point out that Mr. Alsop did eventually return to Sacramento from Fresno with very little fanfare as a corpse. Died in Fresno in 1915, was brought back here to City Cemetery and buried next to his mother. Gather on in, please.
Yes, Samuel is my husband. He's been wrongly accused of murdering my father. It was self-defense. Never should have happened.
I am truly sorry for your loss. Emil Brickell was your father?
Yes, Emil Brickell.
Can you please tell us what happened to your father and how he died and why your husband is accused?
Samuel and I were in love. Father was none too happy with the relationship and that I had secretly married Samuel. We ran off to the foothills to the town of Columbia and got married there.
Go on.
When we got back to Sacramento, we got ourselves a room at the Golden Eagle Hotel. As fate would have it, a friend of my father saw Samuel and I walking arm in arm and went and told my father of our whereabouts. My father came over to the hotel and found Samuel and I just as we were returning from an evening out. He was absolutely furious. He challenged Samuel in the streets. He said, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" I spoke up and said, "Father, we are married," but he didn't believe me, and he claimed that Samuel had seduced me. Well, a crowd started to gather, and my father told him, "If you're not for this crowd, I would cut you in two."
And the whole town was there. It must have been very frightening for you. What happened next?
My father left. The following day, I was conversing with friends in the ladies' parlor of the hotel when around 7 p.m. my father returned. Just then, Samuel was coming down the stairs and saw my father standing in the lobby. I was absolutely terrified. What was my father going to do? What was I to do? My father reached into his breast pocket and told Samuel to stand fast. As any man would, Samuel took this as a threat, and he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out his pistol and fired 4 shots, hitting my father.
Oh, do you need time to compose yourself?
No, I need to explain what happened. Turns out, clutched in my father's right hand was a note drawing up a dowry. He had decided to accept the marriage after all.
And he was dead 4 hours later.
Yes. Never more would I see my father. Never more would I have my husband by my side. He was taken to the prison ship at LaGrange on the Sacramento River.
And is it true that you purchased poison?
Yes, I needed poison for Samuel and myself. I decided that we would die together on our own terms, but it was not meant to be.
Once again, I am so sorry for your loss. If you have nothing further for the court, you may be excused. And Samuel was found guilty, and he was sentenced to be hanged. And his last words, as he had written them and spoke them: "Fellow citizens, I am about to die for the crime of murder. I am innocent. I never murdered any man. I committed the crime of manslaughter. I killed Mr. Brickell. I killed him in self-defense and for the protection of my own life. Rumors have been circulated that there was a conspiracy between Mrs. Brickell, his wife and daughter, and me to kill him. This is not correct. I killed him, and I am only responsible. I killed him without malice. I had no malice in my heart. I always liked him and respected him. It is useless, however, to say anything further. This is all I have to say. And at that, the sheriff cut the rope, sending Samuel to his death.
Tonight, do you want to point out just ahead, though, the mortuary chapel never actually used as a chapel. It was used as storage for bodies until burial. It was used as a records office for a while. It's recently been restored and turned into a museum. So feel free to come back in the day. You can go inside and learn more about the cemetery on the panels on the walls. But at the very least, you can admire the stained glass we have in the back of the chapel. Now, the halfway point of our show is going to be an entertaining stage show. Although I hope you've been entertained so far, right? Good, all right, excellent. Our entertaining stage show. Before you take a seat, though, there are snacks underneath that tent, various goodies, hot cider. But please, please, please let the servers get the food for you. Do not grab it by yourself. The health department would prefer that. Just get a snack, take a seat, and the show will begin shortly.
The one stood up within the tomb. Hi.
Hi.
for me. I seek inspiration from the milk of paradise. Once upon a midnight dreary, when I was all drunk and beery. Oh, I keep coming to a dead end. I think I have righteous H&R Block. It's very taxing. Once, when I was annoyed with Siri. Oh, rats! My beautiful bell. Now I can complete my masterpiece. You brought baby, I see. Berenice, those teeth are beautiful. And you, the latest in shroud I see. And my fair queen. Ladies, I wish you to make yourselves most comfortable. My poor dead women, I need your help. I want you to read my latest work aloud, so I can then complete it, ready to submit for publication. First, step forward, my golden bell. Then, I'm sorry, I'm a little tipsy. Oh! And then my golden bell, my brass bell, and last of all, my ironic bell. Iron! Morella!
Here are the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells. How they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. In the icy air of night, while the stars and oversprinkle, all the heavens seem to twinkle with a crystalline delight, keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the
Tintinabulation.
That's so musically bells. From the bells, 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 bells. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells. Jingle bells swing and jingle bell ring. Dancing and prancing.
Stop! What are you doing? Sit! My dear.
Hear the mellow wedding bell, golden bells. What a world of happiness their harmony foretells. Through the balmy air of night, how they ring out their delight. From the molten golden notes, all in tune, what a liquid ditty floats. Ask me, how do I feel? Ask me now that we're cozy and clinging. Well, sir, all I can say, if I were a bell, I'd be ringing.
I find fault with this.
And if I were a watch, I'd be popping my strings. And if I were a bell, I'd go ding dong, ding dong.
I have created a monster! Back! 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 To the tomb!
the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. What's tale of terror now their turbulency tells? In the startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Stop! In the name of love, before you break my heart.
Don't encourage them.
Too much horrified to speak. They can only shriek, shriek. Stop! In the name of love, before you break my heart. Think it all over. Think it all over.
No, 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 no! Sit! Oh, God! Where is my brother William when I need him? Lenore! You must save the day. Please, step forward and just read.
Don't worry. I promise I won't summon them. Not a note. Will you take the baby, please? Hear the tolling of the bells, iron bells. What a world of solemn thoughts their monody bells. What silence of the night. In the silence of the night. I wish you might till we go back. How should be happy? Should I continue here as I do?
No, nevermore. Will I ask your help? Nevermore! Nevermore!
Oh.
Nevermore. Ladies, you have inspired me once again. I think my next poem should be a song. Lenore, the Stradivarius. As I looked into my corridor, I saw a raven at my door, saying nothing else but nevermore, 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 nevermore. The big black raven told me nevermore. Nevermore, nevermore, nevermore. The big black raven told me nevermore. Spirits, join us. Nevermore, 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 nevermore. The big black raven told me nevermore. This has inspired me. We must form a musical group. Edgar and the Poets! No, let us celebrate. We must alliteratively perambulate to the Pit and the Pendulum public house, and there to tip back a pint of porter. Nevermore, 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 nevermore. The big black raven told me nevermore,
Play around.
Won't take much effort. Just medium effort.
Just smile and nod and move on.
Have a nice evening.
Please gather around. Don't mind covering your eyes for just a second. I need to flash this. ravens can't see as well as you might think. Yeah. You might wonder where the spirit is for this story. Well, it's me. As the son, as I said, so to speak, of Edgar Allan Poe and the nephew of Charles Dickens, I do have some literary blood coursing through my veins, so I decided to add to the festivities, I suppose, of the evening by composing one of my own poems based on the true story of two people buried here, a married couple buried here in City Cemetery by the name of Albert and Alice Kuntz. And this is told from the point of view of Mr. Kuntz. It was many a year ago, in our city under the moon, that I lived with my darling, my life, and my wife, the beautiful Alice Kuntz. We lived a life most wonderful, but it ended much too soon, when illness took my dearest wife one springtime afternoon. She had a cancer, it was said, that gave her so much pain. Have it taken out, I pled. She answered with disdain, I will not, she said to me, these words I would not hear. I am afraid of surgery. You cannot ease my fear. I was the one that made her go. I became her executioner. For soon after that, alas, she died. Infection, said her practitioner. For 10 long months she came to me each night in fitful dreams. Her spirit buzzed and shook my bed. I awoke to my own screams. Finally, I could take no more. My fate I soon conspired, with trusty gun and paper and pen, to draft the guide required. There is no life without my dear, the guilt I cannot waive. Burn my body when you find this note. Place my ashes on her grave. The note was done, I never wavered. My death would be rebirth. I joined my love in the sweet hereafter, my last thought here on earth. And so with my darling my ashes abide, my life and my wife evermore. We lie neath the lights of the bright gazing moon, together forever, alone, nevermore. Thank you. I know it's not quite the literary quality of my father or my Uncle Chuck's, but keep in mind, we Ravens, we have the intelligence of about a 4-year-old human child. So if any of you have a 4-year-old child, I challenge them to write a poem as good as this one. Follow me, please.
By to pay your respects to the Woolsey family. I'm certain they would appreciate your visit, but I'm afraid they've gone off to her mother's home shortly after the little girl's funeral. May was their beloved daughter, and they need time away to grieve. Mrs. Woolsey asked that I pack up May's things while they were gone. I guess she just couldn't stand to see the sight of them. Poor sweet May. Just about to turn 13. Died of encephalitis after getting the measles. Can you imagine? It is 1879 and they've known about that awful disease for 40 years. You'd think they'd be able to do something about it by now. Mrs. Woolsey believes in spiritualism. That nonsense about some folks being able to contact the dead. I suppose she'll be giving that a try, no matter what it costs. I hear some folks say they actually see May wandering about. Ghosts, spirits. I don't believe in any of that, do you? What is this? It appears to be a letter from the child. I am so happy as I did write to you and say I was happy. Now, Mama dear, do not weep for me. I am not dead, no, only gone before to wait your coming, when you will be out of all sorrow and care and will be happy with me. Oh, what pleasure there is in a spirit life no one can tell. Only think of everlasting life and pleasure where we know no sorrow. All is sunshine. There is no cloud to darken our path as on earth. We have our choice of mission. I better put this away or else they'll think I wrote it for her mama to find. Or worse yet, that they wrote it from the afterlife. No, I'll tuck it away here in her clothing and they'll find it later on. I better be getting back to my own chores at home. I will certainly tell the Woolseys you stopped by. Good night now.
The boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? Premature burial, 1844. The Woolsey home here in Sacramento was remodeling it, and underneath of, behind a false wall, underneath the stairs, he found a trunk, the trunk you saw back there, full of May Woolsey's items, including that letter. And nowadays, if you'd like to see them, you can actually go to the Sacramento History Museum and see the trunk, that very trunk, and some of the items that May's family decided to put away.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Bergman. When Edgar Allan Poe's beloved wife died, he poured his grief into this two-line poem. Deep in earth, my love is lying, and I must weep alone. A young woman named Georgia Fisher lies buried in that corner of the cemetery. She died but 5 days before her wedding. Her fiancé was my son, the famous decorative clay tile maker, Martin Bergman. This evening I'll share with all of you the story of how my son poured his grief at losing his beloved fiancé into his tile-making artistry and created a Sacramento legend. It begins in the 1860s when Martin and my other son established a very successful tile-making and pottery business here in Sacramento, known as the Bergman Brothers. Our family home was located at 30th and N Streets. I needed some help around the house, and I hired Georgia Fisher. Oh, Georgia was kind, full of joy, and most wonderfully, she and Martin fell completely in love. Georgia and Martin planned to marry on New Year's Day, 1876. But as the wedding date approached, Georgia fell ill. Terribly ill. Georgia died on December 27th, 1875, a mere 5 days before their wedding. Oh, Martin's grief ripped apart his very soul, and from the depths of his sorrow, he vowed to build not just a tombstone for her grave, but the most beautiful monument he could possibly create. Martin's heartache melded with his artistry, and when it was completed, the monument of love for Georgia Fisher was a masterpiece. A statue of the angel Gabriel was placed upon the very top of the monument so as to watch over Georgia. An ornamental clay fence encircled and enclosed the entire plot to protect Georgia. The monument itself was made from small decorative tiles that Martin handcrafted, and those tiles were made with more than mere clay. As he sculpted each tile with his bare hands, Martin's tears for the woman who would never more be his wife, and for the family they would never more build together, streamed down his face and mixed into the clay. Oh, I do hope that you'll all return in the daytime to see for yourself the monument where Georgia Fisher lies buried deep in earth. Although it's worn and no longer complete, it still radiates Martin's undying love for Georgia. And when you're here, be sure to look closely at those legendary tiles. For when the light shines at just the right angle, you can still see the glistening of my son's tears in the clay. And as the wind sweeps over the tiles, if you hold your head just so, you can hear the sounds of my son weeping when he made them. Tears for the woman he would hold in his arms. Nevermore. Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a tale for you. But before I begin, may I ask you, have you ever been lost or truly alone? Maybe in the cold and the dark, and you were hungry and wondering when or even if rescue would come. Well, that was the conditions of the miners that night. And I remember being shaken to my very bones when I heard about the cave-in. And if I introduce myself, I'm Mrs. Nellie Oates, and I am the widow of Alfred Oates. And I remember that night so well. It was February 28th, 1900. For me, well, I was fast asleep in my bed, and I had my daughter Mary beside me. I loved having sweet Mary there because my husband Alfred worked alongside his brother Joseph at the Iron Mountain Mine up near Reading. And perhaps you know this? Yes. Well, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was woke by a tremendous roar that came from that mountain, down the hillside, down into the valley, and into the homes of every family below. That mine that had supported all of us, that produced copper in even greater value than gold at the time. That mountain had come down upon us, burying our friends and family. My Alfred and Joseph were among them. Now, I remember there was no one living near there but the miners themselves, and well, all of them scrambled from their beds and headed to the mine, and they began tearing at the rubble with picks and axes and shovels, and I remember seeing men digging with their bare hands to bring those miners to the surface. No, that mine that supported all of us was our tomb. Oh. By morning light, though, the workers by the dozens had come pouring out of that cave and had been rescued. And the miners continued digging. And eventually there were 8 bodies left behind. My Alfred and Joseph were among them. But they had been tapping on the tramway, the rails that brought the gold up, silver up, copper, yeah. And they've been tapping on there to communicate with the rescuers. And eventually, all went silent. I remember them continuing on, and they brought up 4 bodies. Joseph was among them, and Alfred was not. But they continued on in quiet determination until eventually they brought all of those bodies to the surface, out of the dark and into the light, only to be entombed once again. Now, the Copper Mountain Company that owned Iron Mountain Mine, well, they were absolved of all responsibility. And in return, they raised the salary each day from $2.75 to $3, as if that would bring back my Joseph and Alfred and the others. And they continued on. We buried Alfred and Joseph and the others. And soon the flowers began to wilt, and the memories of that horror faded. But you know, they say that for the survivors, continuing beyond death takes courage. And I did find courage. Eventually, I remarried and bore 2 sons, and I continued on. For most of us, life does go on, but for others, life is nevermore. Thank you for sharing my sound. Pleasant evening.
The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close. The pendulum 1842. And that was our final story of the evening. I just want to lighten the mood a little bit with a little account that deals with us ravens and our cousins, the crows. Crows and ravens, very close related. They look very similar, and in fact, there was some question about whether or not we were two separate species or simply one. A group of scientists got together and studied us, gathered a group of ravens, a group of crows, studied size, color, shape, eating habits, how we flew, and they couldn't find any difference between crows and ravens. So we thought, well, they thought, I should say, there really is no difference. Until one scientist was paying very close attention, started counting the number of feathers, and found out that the number of pinion feathers, which are the main flight feathers that allow me and my relatives to fly, on ravens, we have one more pinion feather than crows. So the difference was finally figured out. Crows and ravens, two different species. Now, I have to say, I don't know why they went through so much time and expense to figure that out, because they simply could have asked me, and I would have told them that the difference between crows and ravens is simply a matter of opinion. Last joke of the evening, I thought. Well, thank you. Do you want to point out? Well, I want to thank you for coming along. Like Ms. Eisen said earlier, the money you pay for your tickets does go completely to restoration, maintenance of our monuments and other artifacts, and so our spirits here do appreciate your generosity. Do certainly recommend you come back in the daytime when you can see a little bit more, but please do drive safely on your way home tonight. While we do want you to return, we don't want you to return too quickly. Take your time coming back. I do want to just finish off before I bid you adieu with a poem by my father by the name of El Dorado. It was written in 1849, so it was inspired in part by the events of the gold rush happening here in California. It was one of his final poems before his death, and it describes what many gold miners found, and we have several of them here in the cemetery. They came out here for quick riches, but found only despair and brokenheartedness. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. Once again, thank you very much for coming along. Hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you very much, thank you very much. Our pleasure. Follow me back to the exit.
Okay, that concludes October 25th, 2019 series of the lantern tours here at the Sacramento City Cemetery. And they have one more batch of tours tomorrow, and it was just awesome. Definitely would recommend doing it again. And if you missed out, I highly recommend being here in person, because it doesn't do any justice on tape. So thank you so much for everyone watching. If you're ever in Sacramento, come here. It's located here on Broadway, near Riverside, and take some time out and see some of the local history, because there's plenty of that here. And it's just the people that put this all together and everything, they do so much. They preserve the history for the future, and it's important to visit cemeteries and, if not necessarily keep the memories alive of others, to learn about the history and the good and the bad, so that tomorrow can be a better place. So, anywho, thank you so much for watching this episode of Grave Time, and have a safe Halloween. God bless you all. Bye.
Park, whistle dear when it's dark, like a meadowlark. Once you're hidden, don't be heard, not a sound.